All right, I'm gonna share my PowerPoint. So is everyone seeing the PowerPoint? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good, good. All right, so welcome everyone to season 9 of Environmental Fridays. It is personal. And if you like to learn some more, read some more about Environmental Fridays, you could use that link there in the middle of the page of the slide. And we have a QR code at the bottom right that you could also use to get to our website. On our website, you will find, if you again use the QR code to the top left, all of our guest speakers and co-hosts for this season, season 9, their photos and their bios are there. And on the bottom right, that QR code is for all of our past episodes. I think we are up to about 139, 138 or so episodes. So all of them are here on YouTube, and you could use the QR code for that. I'll take some time here to also acknowledge at the bottom of the slide our partners and co-hosts, um, co-sponsors, starting with Michigan Eagle, um, Caribbean Compass, the American Chemical Society, ACS Society, Committee on Minority Affairs, Benton Spirit Community Newspaper, where I'm actually live streaming from right now, their offices in downtown Benton Harbor, which is in Michigan, Southwest Michigan, and GC Scored. It's a social emotional wellness organization um, presided over by my sister. And so you could see here in our schedule for the entire semester that we've gone through a number of really cool presentations and some more coming up. In fact, for this month, next month, we have next week a teenager, a high school student, will be presenting. And so I'm looking forward to that. Um, Today is the last day of October, which by every measure that I've seen is the best month of the year. Um, so our presentation today is part of our farewell to October. Just joking. Um, and so you could see we have a number of other really cool presentations coming up on November 14th, November 21. Um, One of the things we are trying to encourage persons to do, and I'll probably try to get that all organized some more next week. But in the meantime, when you listen to our, uh, live stream and you have reactions and thoughts and questions, if you write those down and send them to me at murrayd@environmentalfridays.com. We do have a page on our website for feedback and testimonials. You could write suggestions of who you might want to hear from as a guest speaker. You may want to learn more about a topic um, and have suggestions on topics. Whatever your feedback or your reaction, we would love to hear from you. And we'll try to formalize it some more. But in the meantime, please do. And if you also go to our website and look at and use any of the videos, and everyone is free to do that, um, you can also write and tell us more about your feedback. Today, our two co hosts, we have two co hosts today, Blessing is going to facilitate our Q&A, and Elisa, Dr. Benjamin, will introduce Ryan, our guest speaker for today. So, starting with Blessing, she's currently a PhD candidate in materials chemistry at University of South Dakota. Where are you from originally, Blessing?
I'm from Nigeria.
Nigeria? And how
Yes,
long have you been here?
5 years.
5 years? So you do undergrad here or in Nigeria?
No, I did undergrad in Nigeria, then I
In
did my
Nigeria?
master's here. I'm
Oh,
doing my
okay.
PhD.
Okay, so started your master's and now transitioned to PhD. So she's at the University of South Dakota. Her research there focuses on developing sustainable methods for getting rid of some of those compounds that we've had at least two or three presentations on: PFAS materials, fluorochemicals. Um, and she's passionate about circular chemistry. What, in a short, abbreviated way, would you say circular chemistry is, Blessing?
So circularity is just like a process whereby, you know, if you think about the fluorochemicals, of course, we're introducing fluorine to make a fluoroorganic compound.
Hmm.
Then over time, instead of like just keeping that as waste, we'll find a way to like harvest the fluoride from that material and then we take it back into the cycle in such a way that we introduce it into another molecule or another different type of application or function.
So
So that's just the
the
circularity. It's just like a
reuse.
closed loop kind of
It's
thing.
reuse and recycling.
Yes.
Okay, okay. And she is also very interested in climate change mitigation. She's on the committee for the younger chemists associated with the American Chemical Society and is university chair of the Student Leadership Council for Earth. What does the ERC stand for? Earth ERC.
So ERC, okay, so I'll start from Earth. Environmentally Applied Refrigerants Technology Hub.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's just like a grant from NSF in collaboration with six other universities, and majorly it's just also focused on how to promote circularity of refrigerants, like in such a way that we can also address effects that they are causing in the environment and
Okay.
develop new and safer kind of refrigerants and create efficient dehumidification systems and also find ways to like make sure that while all of those things transition into like commercialization, then people are able to also adapt it because we have a lot of different people on the team, like from different departments,
Hmm.
business, policy, a lot of other people all partnering together to make that
Okay.
something achievable.
All right. Very good. Very good. So obviously from, your interest and your work, um, this episode is something of interest to you, and that's actually what you wrote me and told me when you volunteered to be a co-host. Then Lisa has been here before, Dr. Lisa Benjamin. She's a veterinarian epidemiologist. I find that to be two words that are challenging, especially when put together. Veterinary epidemiologist. She she lectures in epidemiology, veterinary public health, food safety at the School of Veterinary Medicine. Isn't that is that located at Mount Hope, Lisa?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah. So I just, personal thing. I Our home is in Pittsburgh, and oftentimes when I'm back home, I would actually walk from Pittsburgh to Mount Hope. It's a nice trek, but it's a nice scenery too. So it's close enough
Yeah.
for a walk. Yeah. So her major research interests include antimicrobial resistance, food safety, surveillance of zoonotic diseases. And I think all of these have to have some bearing on the environment. She is the treasurer of the Caribbean Academy of Sciences, Trinidad and Tobago chapter, and also a member, executive member of Trinidad and Tobago's Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management volunteer group. So hopefully one of these episodes would be devoted to a topic of your choice. You could go in many different directions. So it's a pleasure to and privilege to have you on here as one of our co-hosts as well. Okay, so at this point, we will have you, Lisa, introduce Ryan.
Okay. So this morning, hello everybody.
Yes.
This morning, I have the honor to introduce Mr. Ryan Bechu, who is an experienced climate journalist with 15 years under his belt. He has Bachelor of Arts degrees in journalism and mass communications from the College of Science, Technology, and Applied Arts of Trinidad and Tobago. He has covered 3 United Nations COP conferences and multiple convenings with respect to climate change. He has reported extensively on the energy transition in the Caribbean while also focusing on climate justice. He brings a wealth of experience in the major stories the world will be focusing on during the UN Climate Change Conference. His focus is on small island developing states as well as global north countries. While the COP can be a complex conference, he breaks it down and indicates what we should look out for. So welcome, Mr. Bechu.
All right, very good. Thank you. And you should be able, Ryan, you should be able to, let me stop sharing my slide. You should be able to upload your PowerPoint.
Thanks, Lisa. Thank you very much, Dr. Murray, and great to see you blessing. It's a little bit intimidating to be among such a high-profile academia, but I am going to try my best. This is a topic that means a lot to me, covering the United Nations Climate Change Conference, which equates to what is known as the conference. So I did a little bit of a slide here that I hope will work. Right. So that's WhatsApp, and I should have, yeah.
Okay, so it's coming up.
All right. There we go.
So try full screen.
Reviewing COP30 on Environmental Fridays. Thanks very much for having me, Dr. Murray, because I know I tried to do this a little bit earlier on in the year, and I think your schedule itself for that particular season was packed. But I did try again to try to be on Environmental Fridays because I do appreciate this platform a lot. And so we are just over a week, the Conference of Parties, which is the United Climate Change Conference, the 30th of its kind. So it's sort of a reflective time for those of us who cover climate change, are in that climate change. It comes now at a really interesting time, particularly for us here in the Caribbean, because what was the biggest news story in the world this year? Well, rather this week. It would have been Hurricane Melissa running a riot through Jamaica, Haiti, Cuba, the Bahamas. And in just over a week, along with the Alliance of Small Island States, which represent Barbados, like Grenada, like St. Vincent and the Grenadines, like the Bahamas. They will meet in Belém, Brazil for COP30. But why does COP actually matter? Because I often hear, even from my own editors, I hear that it's just a mighty. That's not exactly true. The process by which we are fixing the climate, and I say we because I think we're doing it as an industry, the process by which we are fixing the climate is slow. It's not moving as fast as people will like it, but it works. In 30 years, we have seen great progress. Had we not started this process 30 years ago, probably reached 2 degrees Celsius by now, which would have been islands here, and those in Latin America, in the Pacific, those in Asia. So the COP process works, albeit very slowly, but that's politics for you. So this year will mark the 30th session of the UNFCCC, which equates to the United Nations change. It's a key moment to move from negotiation, which we've been doing a lot of, to now implementation. So many observers are labeling this implementation COP for the very reason that I've outlined. A lot of people feel we've talked a lot, we've did a lot, we've discussed a lot. Now it's time to implement a lot. But this COP will also help us to take stock of how countries are doing under the Paris Agreement, which was signed in 2015. Holds the entire world to account when it comes to limiting temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Interestingly, 10 years later, as in this year, 2025, it hit global headlines when scientists say that we have now reached a climate tipping point, the mainstream media called it. Because that 1.5 degrees Celsius that we were hoping we could hold firm to now seems to be impossible. And it now seems that we will be going over that. I was talking to Dr. James Fletcher, who's a CARICOM climate envoy, yesterday, and I was getting his thoughts. He's in Seoul, South Korea right now. And I was getting his thoughts on this. He was one of the key people from the Caribbean that really pushed that 1.5 to campaign so that the Paris Agreement can sign. Is that not because we've reached 1.5 degrees Celsius that we now look at 2 degrees. He's hoping that if we have to overshoot 1 degree or 2 degree, and he's really 0.1 degree, I should rather say, or 0.2 degree. So maybe 1.6 or 1.7. This world to limit warming, limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. This year's COP30 will take place in Belém, Brazil, which is very much in the Amazon region. And it starts on Monday, November 10th, November 21st, and it will take place at the Hangar Convention and Fair Center of the Amazon. So the conference, as it always does, will bring together governments, businesses, civil society, local actors, indigenous people, and so many others. Interestingly, we like to also say when we talk about all the people that will be brought together, the oil and gas industry will also show up in Belém, Brazil. The oil and gas industry will also be a stakeholder in these conversations in Belém, Brazil. They are not excluded. Because this is a climate change conference. In fact, their lobbyists very much show up. At COP28 in Dubai, there was the largest number of oil and gas lobbyists they have ever seen at a COP. So it is not alien for these lobbyists to show up at a UN climate change conference where they're trying to reduce the use of fossil fuels in Belém, Brazil in a big way. So the global backdrop and where we stand with regard these nationally contributions equate to what each country, each individual country would like to contribute to the climate fight. So let's just take an example. If Trinidad and Tobago, the country I live in, will like to reduce the amount of fossil fuel they use by maybe 20%, 30, that's a nationally determined contribution. So many of the countries' nationally determined contributions are not sufficient to meet the climate targets of 1.5 degrees Celsius, or even the 2 degrees target that was set under the Paris Agreement. According to the first actual global stocktake was taken in 2023, and that was in Dubai. And that concluded that the world is way off course in meeting its climate targets. And that's why they're really pushing for the implementation COP, because the implementation gap can be seen in technical capacity, in climate finance, and the governance, which is really equating to the political will, is still very much lagging across the board, particularly from global north countries. There is this strong emphasis on not just mitigating the impacts of climate change, but how now do we really seriously shift the conversation from mitigation to adaptation. And adaptation is a big deal. You might just think it's a simple word, but now we are basically now saying we have to live with this, and we have to living with this. That's a big deal. Because now many of the small islands, and I know some of you may not be from a small island, but from coming from a small island like where I live, that's a big deal for us to say that we now have to live with climate change for the foreseeable future, and we have to adapt our lives to it. And on that note, I would also like to preface this. For many people who have never had the opportunity to live on an island can seem to a big city or to a big global north. An island can seem like just this small mass of land that floats in a large body of water. That small island in this large mass of water is the world to some people. In my country's case, 1.5 million people. In other countries' case, 300,000 people, 500,000 people, as low as 200,000 people. That's all they know. Similar to the street and the city that you would have grown up in a global north country. And that's your world, which is a big world. This is our world. And that's why when you take that world away from us, when there are storms like Hurricane Melissa, Hurricane Beryl, and Hurricane Erin, when that is taken away from us, we don't have anywhere to go. And so that's why the contributions in the fight against climate change is so very important. This here is what we are terming at COP30, the delivery decade. And 5 years ago, it was equally as important. It was equally as important this decade between 2020 and 2030. But because of the COVID-19 pandemic, because of the lag in how we have been able to tackle this climate crisis, now we are looking between 2025 and 2035. So let's have a look at what we can look out for at COP. Adaptation and resilience will play big. And of course, climate finance always plays big as well. But when it comes to adaptation, we will have to adjust to the impacts of climate change. And there are many, not just in global south countries, but also in global north countries. I'm not sure if anybody lives in New York City, but if you'd follow international headlines, you would have seen the absolute carnage of flooding in New York City yesterday. It was terrible. The visual images are terrible. So this isn't just about small islands. This is about big cities and important cities like New York City too. The flooding was absolutely bad. In fact, We always like to talk about our small islands in Grenada, in Belize, in Trinidad and Tobago, and we like to talk about flooding as a problem and as a political problem. But in these big cities as well, if you looked at those images from New York City yesterday, you'd realize, gosh, the images are very familiar to what we are seeing in our small islands. So adaptation, how do we adapt to the changing climate, is going to play up very big at this COP. Developing countries will argue that adaptation finance has been simply inadequate. And at COP30, there is going to be a lot of pressure to set a new adaptation finance target for the entire world. Because if we are going to have to adapt to this new normal that scientists and others like to call the impact of climate change, then a lot of these countries, including global north and global south countries, are going to need a lot more adaptation finance to help them to adapt to the changing climate. Build better drainage systems, build better dikes when it comes to sea level rise. There will be a lot to enhance our water systems in these countries so that when rainfall is difficult to come by in the first half of the year in the tropics, that we don't have to go through droughts and we can continue to water our crops and our farmers will continue to have access. All of that equates under the term of adaptation finance. The finance gap is absolutely real. Many communities are already being impacted by climate change, and scaling adaptation is absolutely key if we are to ensure that more and more people are not affected by the reality of climate change. And another key thing to look out for at COP30 will be, how will adaptation funding actually be mobilized? What are the mechanisms going to be put in place to assure that adaptation financing is actually brought to fruition? Because what we see at these UN conferences is a lot of promises, a lot of pledges, but that doesn't necessarily translate into the reality. So, some of the big stories that we can look out for at COP30 in the Amazon. The energy transition is continuing, albeit it's now virtually come to a crawling, slow halt in many countries. And particularly after the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a very interesting article in the UK Guardian that many countries, including that of Great Britain, post-pandemic, but of course, post-pandemic, we also had several conflicts erupt across Europe and the world. We saw a lot of these coal plants that were shut down before being jump-started again. So the energy transition is not moving as quickly as we thought and we hoped that it would come. So moving to renewables is going to be a big emphasis at COP30, improving energy efficiency and obviously reducing fossil fuel dependence. All of that is going to be key elements that emerge at COP30. The role of sustainable biofuels is also expected to play big at COP30, right? Because the host Brazil is having the COP in the context of large oil, gas, forest, land use dimension, which offers both opportunities and contradictions to how the global north is handling this. So can we expect stronger commitments to tripling renewable capacity and then phasing out of fossil fuel development? That's something that we can discuss a little bit later. However, that's going to be the key concept of this COP. Do we have the willpower to triple renewable capacity in the next year or in the next 5 years and begin the gradual phase out of fossil fuels? I place that word phase there deliberately because phasing out is a word that UN climate negotiators don't really like to use. They don't like to commit to phasing out by 2030, phasing out by 2035, phasing out by 2050. They don't like to use that word. They don't want to be held to that commitment by the international community that they are going to phase out coal use and they're going to phase out fossil fuel use. So look for those key things that will be happening at COP30 and in Belém, Brazil. So this will certainly dominate the headlines. Expect major producing nations of fossil fuels to resist hard. India is going to come very hard. They have one of the strongest delegations there is at COP. China has a very, very strong contingent as well. Saudi Arabia sends its best to COP, and there are reasons they send their best and their brightest. It's because they want to ensure that whatever they commit to, they don't have to hold on to. They don't have to make it a reality in the next year. So they send their best and their brightest to these COPs. With COP30 being held in the Amazon region, the forests and biodiversity, as well as nature-based solutions, are going to play up very big. And it's inevitable. Because already when we saw that they were bulldozing parts of the Amazon rainforest to create roads for COP30, how that stormed into international headlines all over the world. So there's a special relevance to the Amazon rainforest and the biodiversity that exists there, the indigenous peoples that live there, the land use and how they make up that land, and the deforestation that is happening in different parts of the Amazon and other parts of the world. That's inevitable in a COP that is being held in Brazil in the Amazon. So the agenda will have major focus on forest conservation, on oceans and biodiversity. And there are all thematic days for forests, oceans, and biodiversity days. Nature-based solutions will also play up because now how can we use nature to protect and restore our forests, our wetlands, our ecosystems, and sequester carbon, and to power carbon sequestration and to build resilience. All of these will provide for good talking points at COP30. But the key question really is, can COP30 deliver stronger frameworks to value nature, ecosystem services, and link them with climate policy, and link them with climate policy, and link them with climate policy? Because we can have stronger frameworks with nature and the ecosystem, but again, everything about our world in the 21st century is about policy. If it's not pen to paper, black and white, then you can skirt around it, and that's why these COPs are so important. So multi-level governance when it comes to cities, regions, and local actors. So traditionally, COPs have been dominated by world leaders, governmental organizations, and governmental representatives. At COP30, there's this growing emphasis on cities, regions, indigenous communities. It's been happening a lot over the last, I would say, 4 to 5 COPs. It's expected to be bigger, particularly because you're going to the Amazon where a lot of indigenous communities reside. But what we are seeing more and more of at these COPs is that cities are getting involved in the climate fight. Regions and blocks of nations are getting involved in the climate fight and the climate discussion. Okay, so if my country isn't taking the climate change seriously, how can I better my city? How can I better my region? How can I ensure that our indigenous way of life continues without the impact of climate change? So I think the cities and regions hub will be very key at COP30. Implementation at a local level is really, really key. And that's why this cities and regions hub at COP30 will be really, really key, because it can really reinvigorate local climate financing, and it can also empower communities, which is probably one of the most understated but most important thing we can do when it comes to the climate fight. Empower communities instead of only thinking that this must be done at a national level. So if you're a local government, business, or civil society stakeholder, ask yourself, what role can I play in this? So the thing is, right, interestingly, cities have more than 70% of emissions, and it accounts for 80% of their GDP. So when it really comes, we really have to rethink the way we build our cities and the way we are refurbishing our cities, the way we are upgrading our cities, and most importantly, the way we are living in our cities. All right, especially the bigger the city, the more emissions there is. Climate financing, and equity. This is where the North versus South question comes into play. So, a major fault line in climate policy is the equity between global North and global South countries, developed and developing countries. The responsibility that global North countries have, the capabilities that they have, and the emissions that they traditionally have had, versus those from the South. In our region, here in the Caribbean, we emit less than 1% of greenhouse gases. Yet, Hurricane Melissa, we are in the storm belt, except for Trinidad and Tobago. We are in the storm belt here in the global south, in the south of the Caribbean. We are exempt from it, really. But you go further north, and Jamaica, a country that does not virtually emit greenhouse gases, is this morning picking up the pieces with almost 100%, I'm sure, of GDP destroyed in just several hours of Hurricane Melissa. North versus South. At COP30, the financial flows will matter. How do we mobilize public and private sector financing? Loss and damage. The big questions. Who gets paid and who's paying? How do we determine that? At COP27 in Egypt, loss and damage fund made its way as an agenda item, first time in history, after 27 COPs. But up to this day, we still don't know the mechanism by which we judge who's getting paid and who's paying for this. There's still nothing. We still haven't moved that far as yet. And of course, adaptation financing and mitigation financing will also play big. So what happened was the Baku to Belém roadmap aimed to mobilize at least 1.3 trillion US dollars annually by 2035. But I'll show you some interesting statistics when it comes to adaptation financing in a little bit. Just keep in mind this US $1.3 trillion that the Baku to Belém roadmap hopes that it will achieve in 10 years. So I expect a lot of debate at COP30. What is a fair contribution? And how do we ensure that developing countries' voices are heard in the noise of COP30? And also to push the local and Caribbean relevance of these climate finance matters, particularly for vulnerable regions like the one I live in. Technology, innovation, and just transition. So implementation depends on technology, right? Ensuring that we have the right technology to really build capacity is key. Just transition. We all want to talk about the energy transition, and this is a peeve that I have. A lot of us, especially those in Trinidad and Tobago, which is an oil and gas-based economy, and then you have Guyana, which is an emerging oil and gas-based economy, very much there right now. Suriname as well. When we talk about just transition, okay, if our countries are to transition to greener forms of energy tomorrow, all right, how many of our mechanics will be able to fix an electric vehicle if it's giving trouble? Not mine. Why? Because they have only learned combustible engines. And so are we making our population smarter, giving them the skills and the knowledge so that they can be equipped for these green jobs that are coming in the future. The University of the West Indies is on their way to doing that now, and we need more of that across the region. But just transition ensures that those workers who are in the fossil fuel industry will be able to transition to the greener sector. Sectors such as transport, industry, trade, non-carbon dioxide gases will be addressed between the 14th and 15th of November if you are at COP30, right? We have to look at the technologies and the business models and the financing mechanisms that can unlock action when it comes to ensuring that these small islands have greater technology and greater innovation and can build greater capacity. This issue, I dare say, this issue is the make or break issue, because without credible finance flows, developing nations cannot implement mitigation strategies and adaptation strategies. They simply cannot. Some of the stumbling blocks that we could encounter at COP30. This first one is very important to me. COP has become a huge commercial entity. I was telling a discussion. There's an Alliance of Rural Communities in Trinidad, ARC, Alliance of Rural Communities. They meet ever so often, and when I have the time, I go. And I went a few weeks ago, and I was telling them that we were talking about COP. And I was telling them that COP has become the World Cup of climate change. All of the world descends on one city. 50,000 people, sometimes 80,000, 90,000 people descend on one city. And there's a lot of hype to it. If you know COP, there are two elements to COP. There are the boots. I think that's what they call it, the boots. And then there is the actual negotiations. On the boots, there is a lot of giveaways and a lot of hype, and it's like a carnival, really, of climate change. A lot of good discussions, good people and stuff, but it adds to the hype of COP. And so the world's attention, when you walk through, I remember walking through the courtyard of COP27 in Egypt, my very first COP. And I had to stop for about 30 seconds. I had to stop for about 30 seconds and just take in the atmosphere. Because as a young journalist from a small island, I'm standing in the courtyard. To my left is Al Jazeera. To my right is CNN. In front of me is the BBC. All of the major, to my back, it's ABC News. All of the major networks across the world, you name it, are there. All of their cameras focused on this one event. Global headlines everywhere. I'm sitting here at the desk in the media center. Next to me is a guy from the UK Guardian. I read their newspaper every day. This guy is sitting next to me. There's this risk of the conference being hyped up, but not delivering on the expectations of that hype. For too many COP conferences, this has been the case. And I want to be honest with everyone on this call. I am not one who would like to see or who thinks that all of the climate crises could be fixed in one single COP. And I want to reference what Simon Steele, the UNFCCC Executive Secretary, said in a UK Guardian interview about a month ago. He said something very important that people often don't understand or haven't taken the time to understand. He said, we have this perception that we must solve all of the different elements of the climate crisis in one single COP. And so we set our expectations very high. But That's not possible. Multilateralism doesn't work that way. And so when I say that we hype up COP, I think we have to be realistic in what we want to achieve at the UN Climate Change Conference. And that's why when I see young people protesting and doing their activism, I support what they do. They have the right to do it. And I believe they are the energy behind this climate movement. But you also have to really understand how the multilateralism, or at least take time to understand how the multilateralism process works. And the climate crisis isn't the only crisis that the world is dealing with right now. There are differing national interests at these COPs. That's the worst kept secret, right? Some nations are still planning new fossil fuel exploitation. Others are negotiating greater climate commitments, right? There are diverging agendas at COP. And COP is not majority, it's consensus, meaning that 190 odd parties have to come to a common conclusion. It's not that you split 190 by two and once you have a majority, no. COP is by consensus. Every single party has to agree. That I think it's a great feat that sometimes we end in 2 weeks. Some COPs have failed. Logistics and participation. Accommodation costs in Belém may hamper participation for smaller delegations. That's a fact. It's not only is there limited rooms, but there are also great challenges when it comes to how expensive these rooms are. Monitoring, reporting, verifying progress remains weak, and many countries have delayed or insufficient NDCs. In fact, Trinidad and Tobago, for all that is said about the seriousness of climate change, have not, well, at least I have been asking, up to this morning, I was asking technocrats as well as party insiders yesterday, where is Trinidad and Tobago's nationally determined contributions? No answer. The challenge of coherence, linking climate action with development, nature, and equity. Why does this matter to you, to your country, or if you have a business? COP. Well, if you're in business, like you are in business in Jamaica, you probably won't be able to open your business for the next month, 2 months, or you may have to permanently close because of what happened. Same thing in Haiti, same thing in Cuba, same thing in the Bahamas. So climate change and the climate transition matters if you're a business. If you're a governmental figure or local official, there is a need to align national and domestic plans with international frameworks, not just because it is the right thing to do for your city, but also if you want to access climate finance, you will have to prove that to the Green Climate Fund in a bid to grow resilience. If you're in civil society or non-governmental organization, shaping the narrative and holding players to account, ensuring vulnerable and underrepresented communities are part of the process. For Trinidad and Tobago and other Caribbean islands vulnerable to climate impacts, such as sea level rise, coastal erosion, hurricanes, droughts, opportunities in renewables and nature-based tourism and adaptation financing are all available. So, some key things to watch out for at COP, especially if you are heading there. The Heads of State Summit opening will take place between 6th and 7th, ahead of the formal negotiation process, which begins on the 10th. That's the main COP30 proceedings. After COP30, we must, before I say that, one of the things that peeves me about climate journalism, particularly in the Caribbean, is that climate change ceases to exist after COPs. In the build-up to COP, there are a lot of stories and there are a lot of, great things about COP. Stories upon stories. But after COP, the coverage falls off. there is climate change after COP, and we have to follow the outcomes. We have to follow the decisions that are taken, the declarations that are made. We have to follow whether governments are actually implementing the changes that have been pledged and how the finance is being mobilized and distributed, or if it is not. We have to watch out for announcements, whether there are new NDCs, adaptation finance targets, forest conservation initiatives, biofuel pledges, coal or fossil fuel phase out plans. All of those things we have to look for at COP and after as well. I just wanted to say thanks to everybody for viewing my presentation. I truly appreciate having the opportunity to present on what will be an important COP. I think it could be a defining COP. I think just being held in that Amazon region, the lungs of the world, I think that world leaders are going to be pressured to put something on the table that gives humanity a chance, particularly with us now virtually having overshot 1.5 degrees Celsius, or at least it's now virtually impossible for us not to warm to 1.5 or under. Thank you very much, Dr. Murray. Thank you to everyone for tuning in to my presentation. You can connect with me via email. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook as well. So feel free to keep in touch. I'd love to support the work that you do as well.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank
Blessing?
you so much, Ryan, for those thoughtful reflections. You've really mentioned key realities to actually think about, because if we think about given the fact that we still have a lot of ground to cover, if we are to stay within the safe temperature limits, and with all you have shared and how to, not just think about the climate action itself, but, to start thinking about adaptation and how to balance both the mitigation with the adaptation and, looking at all the smaller communities like where you are right now, like the small island communities like yours in Trinidad, and how the effects of what we're seeing around us should help us start thinking more about these things and how it actually matters to all of us. It's actually something really interesting to me. So I think we'll just move now into the question and the answer section. And I don't know if anyone has questions, like feel free to raise your hand, or and then I can unmute you if you are unable to unmute from your hand, or you can also post the questions in the chat box so I can just read it out and we can have a discussion on this.
Okay. So I want to say, yes, we did have a major event this week with Hurricane Melissa, but we also had another hurricane, Hurricane Gates, Hurricane Bill Gates. And what you said in the end, that this would be a defining COP, basically is true, but it might be true for Bill Gates reasons. Because I don't know if how many persons actually read either headlines or what have you about Bill Gates' new or change in strategy towards climate change. But I'm afraid even, though there might be questions about should we pay attention to what he said, people will pay attention, and it's already stirring up controversy. I'm pretty sure this statement that he made, whether it was intentional or not, the timing of it before COP 30, whether he intended it, I mean, he basically cited and said COP 30 people need to consider this. So yeah, it's intentional.
So for those,
He will
sorry,
change.
Dr. Murray.
This will change, I think, not just the public debate across the world, but also it will bring up lots of questions and concerns and stuff like that at COP 30. So that's kind of overhanging COP 30 right now. Bill Gates, Hurricane Gates.
Yeah. So just for the benefit of those who may not have caught it, I know the headlines and news is so much. Bill Gates this week said he shifted his position on climate change, saying that it will in fact not lead to humanity's
Yep,
demise.
yep.
Yeah. So it was a sort of stunning claim, and Dr. Murray is so right. The timing of such a statement cannot be coincidental.
And it's a whole entire, I mean, I just started reading through it. It's a long, long, long dissertation that he has. He's not denying, just to be very clear, he's not denying climate change. But I think the point he's making, and you actually maybe unwittingly made that point too, is that the world is facing many different crises. And so we have to be judicious, perhaps, in what we pay attention to. And so he is against what I think he called like the doomsday climate change people or idea or philosophy that, this will be the end of humanity in a doomsday apocalyptic type way. But what he's saying is that there are other crises around the world that needs our attention, and we have to, So it it to me
Can
it
I
would have
piggyback on that?
information. It would hold on 1 minute.
Yeah.
It would have stuff that both sides of the debate will latch on to. You see what I'm saying? Because I just saw Trump saying that, yeah, Bill Gates said that climate change is a hoax. He didn't say that, but it's going to stir up more controversy. And I think it's going to be one of the things that would be influential in COP30.
Well, I kind of wonder, and this is a two-part, it's a conjecture and a question.
Hmm.
I kind of wonder whether he made that statement to stay off of Trump's radar because for a long
Mm,
time he
yeah, he
was
doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't care about Trump in that way. He's
fair.
a world unto himself.
But on
No,
the other side of that, what
no.
what would you say to people who do have that kind of doomsday thought process with climate change? Because we're just one person, like what on earth can we do? Kind of at mentality that attitude that, unless the governments or the people in charge or the corporations do something drastic, we're all going to drown. That kind of thought process is very prevalent. What would you say to someone who has those kind of thoughts?
So one of the things so I think he's trying to have a balanced approach. If, we were to like put it in some sort of perspective and summarize what he's trying to say. Because in that document that he wrote, again, it's extensive. We, kind of highlighting one phrase, one sentence will not lead to humanity's demise. But he said a lot more. And so he broke down and basically highlighted all of the improvements that have resulted from our attention to climate change. He broke it down for agriculture, for industry, and has shown that, for example, the level of emissions has decreased significantly since this, thing became a global part of our global awareness and consciousness. So again, he's not denying it, but his statement will allow people on both sides to like keep going at it. I see another hand there, Laurel.
Yes, thank you. I do want to point out that I do think we're in multiple crises.
Yes,
Dr.
yes,
Murray, as you know, we're running out of drinking water. We are not
yeah.
recharging. We're withdrawing more groundwater than is being replenished.
Hmm.
People's wells fail. There are places in this country, in the U.S., where people do not have water. They have to go pick up water or water has to be delivered. The water that is available is contaminated. Um, and remember how people get very wealthy in this country often has to do with technology, which uses a lot of non-renewable resources.
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways, climate deniers to me are protecting their wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we've got technology that can reduce emissions, but we have not gotten anywhere close to eliminating pollution. And so this vortex that we're in, we could be heading to I don't know why we wouldn't. And I'm not a climate, I'm not a, I don't think we're all going to die. We are all going to die, but I don't think it's like next week. But
Right,
we've
right,
had mass extinctions on this planet. Why do we think we're going to be spared, And
right.
and we're upsetting nature. We're upsetting the planet and the inner planet by just still consuming it. We're consuming our planet from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
And by fracking and digging up oil when we have solar alternatives and many other alternatives. So I'm sorry to be on a soapbox, but I was very surprised when I saw the Bill Gates headline and began to read it. And I was like, no,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like you're just trying to, not be the next target of the nastiness and end up, being indicted for your
Oh
beliefs or
no.
something. But just
Yeah,
just
that's one
Yeah,
wanted to
reason
throw
why I
that
said
out
what I
there.
did.
yeah, I know, but I
Yeah.
don't really think Bill Gates gives anything about Trump. I mean, I really don't. Because most of the times that I've seen him come out with, statements and stuff, it's not just a statement sort of isolated. He gives an entire, like a dissertation. Okay. Um, I don't really think he is bothered by Trump or afraid of, I don't really think so. I think he genuinely, and he's put money. So that's the part that I'm wondering about is that, okay, he's put billions of dollars into climate change. He's also put a lot of money into health issues, especially in the tropics and stuff. Does this mean now that he's going to start pulling money from his money from climate change and putting more into health issues? It sounds like that's what will could be a result of what he's saying, that there are multiple crises, multiple issues, and that we have to. I think one statement said that we have to deal with them in proportion to the suffering they cause. So, yeah, there are people in this world who don't give a hoot about Trump. Okay, I think Bill Gates is one of them, but that's just my opinion. I mean, he could buy and
I
sell
think,
Trump like a million times over.
yes, I don't think he personally cares, but I think that he also sees what kind of backsliding has happened because of that administration.
Hmm. That's true. Um, Anybody else? You don't have to stay on the topic of Bill Gates, but I just thought that the timing of what he said and all of that is going to be something that's already stirring up controversy. You could go, check it out online, and that it will impact this upcoming COP. That's really the point I was trying to make. It's gonna impact it. I don't know to what degree and how, but we'll see.
Okay, so I have a couple questions. Um, One, how I imagine it's the COP, some committee in COP that decides where they want to have the next meeting. And how do you get governments to agree, especially like Brazil, which has come under so much fire by what they're doing in the Amazon, and you're able to get them to agree to have it in the Amazon? A second question is how many times a year do they meet? Because if we're at COP 30, and has it been meeting for 30 years? Is it that long? And the third question is, when nations contribute, How do they do it? Cash, kind, how? So that's 3 questions.
Yeah, so on your first question, the COP moves around to different blocks of nations. So right now it's being held in the Latin America and Caribbean bloc. Last year it was Europe, and the year before that it was Middle East. So it moves around, and there is a pretty good bidding process for that. Last year, many countries expressed their interest in hosting the United Nations Climate Change Conference. It does really, to be honest with you, it's having 50,000 people come to your city. It does really inject some level of economic activity in that particular city that the COP is being hosted in. Sometimes it gets very political. Last year, Russia didn't want to support the city of Baku to host the UN Climate Change Conference. But there were some negotiations, and eventually Russia relented, and they would have allowed Baku to host the COP. When it comes to the issue of climate finance and how climate finance is distributed, that's a good question. Because part of the challenge with climate finance right now, and Dr. James Fletcher, the CARICOM climate envoy, was making the point to me. He was saying to me that a lot of the climate finance that these countries have to take are loans. Not necessarily, it doesn't come in the form of grants. Maybe it should be, but it doesn't. So you would find that Jamaica, a country like Jamaica, now reeling from Hurricane Melissa, may have to take a loan, a huge loan, to get back on its feet. And the problem with that is that Jamaica will not get back totally on its feet over the next year. It could take several years. But what if there's another hurricane next year? Maybe earlier in the hurricane season, or mid-hurricane season, or late in the way that it came very late. Melissa came very late. Then you find yourself now having borrowed money to rebuild, and then another hurricane comes, ravages again. Where do you go from here? And that's the plight that small islands tend to face. But to answer your question directly, that climate finance, moreover, comes in the form of loan. In fact, there was a very good Telegraph investigation from the UK newspaper, Telegraph investigation, showing that most of the climate finance to small islands were in the form of loans, and very few were in the form of grants.
Okay. Other questions, comments?
Maybe a follow-up. Is COP concerned that when they have these huge meetings, that they're contributing to the environmental problems too? How is it balanced?
Yeah, and something I forgot to mention at the tail end of what you would have asked as well. Yes, COP is not the only meeting that takes place on a year-to-year basis. Yes, there is this one major conference of parties that happens at the end of the year, and it's been happening for the last 30 years. But there are others as well. There's the bond meetings, there is the ministerial meetings that happen as well throughout the course of the year, building up to the COP. Keeping check on the agenda. There is it's one of the biggest criticisms of the UN Climate Change Conference. Flying 50, 80, 90,000 people into one city for a UN Climate Change Conference. Air carriers, airlines actually bump up the number of flights. Some airlines that don't even fly to places like Belém, like Baku, make that a route so that they could cash in on the number of people flying to those COPs. In fact, interestingly, while I was at COP27, another really interesting one is that the UK Guardian did a story on the number of private jets that flew into that COP. private jets, these aren't just commercial airliners flying 300 people on board to a COP. These are private jets. Guess how much? The number was like 10,000 private jets flying in and out of COP over the 2 week period. Well, just about 3 weeks, a week before COP as well. So it was huge. So yes, it's one of the greatest criticisms of a COP, having so many people fly to one destination and using airlines, obviously, which disseminate greenhouse gases. It's one of the greatest criticisms of the UN climate change conference, and a lot of people call it hypocrisy, a contradiction. You name the word, they call it, and a lot of climate activists and newspapers criticize it. Dr. Hines?
Thank you so much for your presentation. I was on a radio program and was very late in turning on, but your passion comes through the airwaves.
Thank you,
And
Doctor.
I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
What do you do in between COPs?
Cover climate change. Yeah. I've tried as best as I can without. So I work for Guardian Media, CNC3 Television to be exact, in Trinidad and Tobago. And yes, it's impossible to have climate change as your pet beat. Impossible, not in our circumstances. The editors don't care enough about it, or at least one or two editors might care about it. But I still, out of my own volition, I cover climate stories. Yes, I tell climate stories throughout the year. I made it my priority because when I came back from COP27, I realized that a lot of people, a lot of journalists, particularly in the Caribbean, would cover COP, especially if they go to it, and then not cover climate change again for the rest of the year. And I never wanted to be that person. I always wanted to keep it in the news throughout the year, and that's essentially I add that to my other duties at CNC3 Television.
Yes, I find that it is someone put in the chat COP tourism. I think it's aid tourism. I think there's a vulgarity to the uh, waving off of persons appealing to you for an appointment or for help by saying that, oh, I'm traveling to, or I'm just from, or I'm over at. And you would find if you really want someone to attend to a request, they're not available. They are flying from or to something. And we have, as a society, as a global society, sort of institutionalized that as contributing to something, and it is to nothing. It is that we destroy our earth by just having this ability to move around. And I think if we wanted to really move around in a beneficial way, we should walk. If there's a conference that you can walk to, then that's the conference to attend. To say that you're helping someone in Bogota and you fly there to give them $68 is not contribute. You can use your air cost and send that money to Bogota. I'm an old UN staffer, and I remember being at a general meeting, and folk were reporting that this big project that they had, and the persons in this country were getting, I wouldn't forget the figure, $68. And I thought to myself, what is the overhead that you have invested in giving someone $68 to have their farm? I couldn't, it couldn't compute at all. And I've also worked at ADRA, and that's one of my churches. There's a vulgarity in always being in the air. One of my colleagues went to a country in Africa to pick up files that could be faxed. And I'm thinking, your plane fare, your DSA, your hotel, your in-country transportation to pick up something that could be faxed. I think we're quite disingenuous when we think about aid or climate change or all these things when it is really personal gain of tourism.
So one of the aspects that I wanted to kind of look at with you, because you basically are in the communication business, and how do you try to communicate the technical information. I mean, many times when people use the phrase global warming or climate change and all of that, people's eyes just kind of glaze over, like, okay, how do you as a communicator make it real, make it make sense for just, a high school student or just someone who is on a 9 to 5 job and concerned mostly about this day-to-day survival? How do you communicate these ideas, this effort, so that people at least get their attention and maybe follow that up with some of their action? How do you do that as a communicator, especially in the context of the Trinidad and the Caribbean?
So, Dr. Murray, I think you've put your finger on my career, to be honest, in climate
Okay.
journalism. Yeah, no,
Okay.
it might sound, I don't often say it because it probably sounds a little bit trivial but essentially, when I returned home from COP27 and I started doing stories on climate change year round, that was my inspiration. That was my inspiration.
Mm,
My inspiration was not to travel. My inspiration was not to become famous. My inspiration was what I was inspired to do was that I'm from a rural community in Princestown, and
we used to live there.
what
Well,
I had no, yeah,
okay.
what I had noticed was my parents and other elders in the village would constantly say things like, gosh, the sun is so hotter than it was when I was growing up. The rain never
Mm,
used to fall this much. They would say things that they didn't understand. They
mm-hmm,
they they
mm-hmm,
they were observing noticeable shifts
mm-hmm.
in the weather patterns, but they couldn't connect it with whatever was happening. They didn't care enough to either. And so that was a regional problem. It wasn't just in my small community. It was across the Caribbean. And so I set about trying to tell stories, explaining to people why the sun is so much hotter than it was when they were growing up in the 90s, why the rainfall is so much more violent than it was when they were growing up in the 80s, and connecting it with real world examples that we were facing. That was my inspiration. I just
Okay.
wanted people to understand that the weather that they are facing now, why it's so different than when they were growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And that really was, I tried breaking it down with examples, breaking down the terms, the glossary of terms that come with climate change. And that really was my inspiration, and that sort of
Okay.
continues to be the foundation blocks of everything I do in journalism for the people of the Caribbean to help them to try to understand, why things are so different with the weather.
That's great. That's great. Yep. Need more of that being done. I'm assuming you reach out and target high schools and other.
I wish I could do it more in a bigger way.
Yeah.
But yes, I do some work, but I wish that we could because that's the age group. We're
Mm,
not going to change, we're not going to change my parents. We're not going to change the elders in my community. They
yeah.
don't know enough, they don't care enough. They've lived their lives, they feel that way. But if we're going to do real tangible change, that's the
Yeah.
core group.
Right.
That's the
Right.
core group.
And incidentally, next week we will be talking to a young person who is deeply involved in environmental work, sustainability work. She's in high school. Jada, I think you
Jada
know
is
her.
doing Jada is one of the shining lights that we have right now in the Caribbean. And when I saw her fly, I was very happy that she made it on this season.
Yes, good, good, good. Other questions or comments?
This is for Ryan. So,
Yes.
like, based on some of the things you shared, I was just wondering, like, now that we're thinking about the key theme or what is expected from the COP30 to be like moving from negotiation to implementation, what do you think are the most significant indicators or like milestones that would tell us that progress is really happening? Because you also mentioned that, the fact that sometimes these conferences may be hyped up and at the end of the day, it happens, it passes, and it looks like there's no much significant change from even like maybe the previous times and just the discussions.
Yeah, thanks very much. That's such an interesting question because I do like, it's easy to knock the UN, it's easy to knock the UNFCCC process for climate change, but we've done some good things. They've done some pretty good things over the last 30 years. Um, you know, there is now, we're now finalizing this climate finance roadmap, which is closer to without that, you know, small island states will continuously be at the mercy of global North countries and global North institutions like the World Bank, like the International Monetary Fund. But, they're actively trying to find this finance roadmap between global North and global South countries. I know Prime Minister Mia Mottley calls for a reorganization of the international financial system, and that's good, but it's more difficult than it actually seems because global South countries are up against a very, very big Goliath in terms of the global North uh, international financial system. But then there are also different things, like the launch of the Tropical Forest Forever facility. That's also a very important. That was also a very important moment when Brazil, in the Amazon, took that initiative with about $125 million, blended finance investment fund, so to speak. That was an important moment because we need Brazil and we need the Amazon, rainforest. The NDCs are also, while a lot of countries, let's just take China, for example, China tends to, if you look at China, you would say, wow, China is doing an amazing job when it comes to meeting its climate targets. In reality, China really underpromises and overdelivers. China in reality can really actually promise a lot more and challenge itself a lot more. Having said that, I would say that the nationally determined contributions it does help. It does have it places a target for the world to meet. And countries, while they may not implement that, what I'm appreciative about the entire process is that countries like India, countries like China, like Saudi Arabia, they don't come and promise things that they feel they won't want to deliver or can't commit to, or at least won't be legally binding if they promise it at a UN climate change conference. So I think the nationally determined contributions, finalizing carbon markets, that's another key aspect in which we will hopefully one day come to a great fruition. So I think, the process itself, while frustrating for many activists and those who want to see climate change solved, I think the climate process has worked for us in the last 30 years. But we are dealing with a very complicated international system of multilateralism that takes, a lot of time. But I'm sorry to sound this way, but I'm confident. I'm confident that we will fix it. I'm confident we will. It may not. I will not be alive, but I think we will fix it.
So that's a really hopeful tone. Before we close though, a specific question may or may not be exactly related, but I know of several Caribbean countries in which they have an Ministry of Environment, and I know that there isn't one in Trinidad. I'm just wondering, have you asked about that? I mean, it's it's in a ministry and they do that, but I'm not sure. From one administration to the next, it still is something that seems not to be on the top agenda that we should have a Ministry of Environment. Do you have any thoughts on that
Yeah.
or insights?
Interestingly, so we do. So Dr. Marie is right. The Ministry of Planning, Economic Affairs and
Right,
Development, the environment falls under that ministry.
right.
But interestingly, earlier this year when there was really bad flooding, or was it last year? No, this year. It was this year. There's really, really bad flooding. It's about 3 months ago. The very next day after the floods, I went out and I polled as many government ministers as I could meet.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked them that one simple question. Do you think it's time for a Ministry of Climate Change? I did it for laughs, to be honest. I just did it. I don't think the story even ever published, but
Okay.
I just did it for laughs. And I asked, and every single one of them, even mayors, some mayors from around Trinidad and Tobago, I asked them, and every single one of them said no, it's not there yet.
Okay.
On both
Okay.
sides, on both
Okay.
sides of the political divide, on
Right,
both
right.
political divide, they all said no. But it's one thing that my colleagues and I were laughing at just this week. We were saying that in years to come, there will be a Ministry of Climate Change in every country in the Caribbean, similar to the Ministry of Climate Change in Pakistan. It's inevitable. It's just the impact of climate change is going to be too severe to ignore.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think someone has a
Pat?
question.
Yes.
Patricia.
Pat, you could unmute.
Thank
There you
you very
go.
much. We did have an Ministry of the Environment in 1986 under the NAR government. We had an
Okay.
Ministry of the
Wow,
Environment
I didn't
at
know
that
that.
time. Okay. The other thing I would like to say, though, is that our present government, unfortunately, is not interested or does not appear. Environment is not heavy on their agenda. For instance, the budget speech that they gave that was delivered 250 something pages had the word environment mentioned 6 times. And in that, there was only one really that was talking about the tax on plastics to help the environment.
Okay.
The word environmental was mentioned 4 times. And that was twice it was talking about the environmental tax on tires.
Okay.
So obviously the environment is not, we have all sorts of problems and you can understand under those, but we do have the 3 pillars, which are the environmental, the social, and the economic. But unfortunately, social and economic take precedence at this point in time. But I would like to ask one question, and it might be out of place. Does Mr. Bechu know who might be representing Trinidad and Tobago
Right.
in COP30 as yet?
It's a great question, Patricia. It's a great, great question. And I pulled up my phone because so I've been everywhere and I've met the Minister of Economic Affairs, Planning, Economic Affairs and Development for quite a couple times over the last month. And everywhere I meet him, I ask him 2 questions. I ask him because our lead climate negotiator, as I understand it, will not be going. That's Kishan Kumar Singh. He's been our lead climate negotiator since 1996.
He's not good.
He's not going. The government has pulled the plug on him.
Okay.
And yeah. So I asked the minister 2 questions. I said, Minister, where are NDCs? It's 2 weeks to COP, 3 weeks to COP, now 1 week to COP. And who is traveling and negotiating on our behalf? Just this morning, I have a source from the ministry, and I ask, can you tell me who's going off the record? I'm eager to find out. I will call you. It's not for text. I said, sounds good. Jumping on a Zoom now. He says, I will call you. Let's speak. We'll give you all the info. Because the ministry is very tight-lipped. Up to yesterday, I was reaching out to the government to find out what's the
Wow.
latest, what is happening. And like Patricia said, information is very difficult to come by. But I'm eager to get that story out on who will be representing us and what's the size of the delegation.
Yeah, we'll be looking out for so you're gonna do it as a news story in print or
Yes.
on air or
Yeah.
okay, we'll
Right.
be looking out for that. If it
I
ever
was
comes, right?
I was actually told that if I want to know, write to the permanent secretary.
Yeah.
Ah, well,
Yeah.
we'll see.
That was my response eventually. That was the latest response that I've had to
Okay,
Blackboard. Write and ask them in the permanent secretary
permanent secretary.
in the ministry.
Oh, wow. All right, so we are 6 minutes past 11. So we've gone a bit long, but that's okay when we have good, interesting, informative conversations. And I think unless somebody has a comment or question that's really, really, really urgent, we'll probably end. I do, however, want to see if Lisa, because she hasn't said much in the discussion, are you holding out on us, Lisa?
No, I was following. It's very interesting. Lots of questions, and I don't think we have enough time today to
Get into
discuss
all of,
all.
yeah.
But yeah, I guess my only wish is that to see how our country and even our region will be represented. And of course, the whole question of climate change, well, I haven't read what Bill Gates said,
Mm-hmm.
but we know that there was a decrease in funding for health,
Mm-hmm.
in Africa and throughout the region. And as an
Mm-hmm.
epidemiologist, this is something that really concerns me
Yeah.
because there are lots of things that can really be affected there. And there's the intersection with the climate change as well
Yeah.
that affect health. So,
That's right.
I don't
That's
know where
right.
he's going with that, with what he said. I haven't read what he said, but
Right. So he, as we all know, he does contribute a lot, right, to health issues and stuff in Africa and other places. But of course, as you mentioned, USAID is pretty much gone. And that was a huge, had a huge impact for good, not just in Africa, but around the world in areas that you would be interested in epidemiology and stuff. So, yeah, we'll see. There's lots to talk about, lots to discuss, lots of issues out there in the world, and we're glad that we have our co-hosts. We are glad that we have our guest speaker here to at least have that type of discussion here today. So, in closing, just want to again thank Dr. Lisa Benjamin, thank Blessing, and to thank Ryan, our guest speaker today. Thanks to all who participated and attend our sessions. And we wish you a great weekend. Yeah, read that stuff. Keep up with what's going on, at least what's happening here. And also keep Jamaica in our prayers. Jamaica, Haiti, Cuba. Did it affect the Dominican Republic too? Don't remember or recall, but
They were not mentioned.
but keep them all in prayer. Do what you could to help out, and we will see you again next week when we will have another special episode. If it's Friday, it is Environmental Fridays. It is personal. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for a very,
Thank
very
you,
good
everyone.
presentation.
It was
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you.